think that's all we have to do to be broadcasting live.
All right.
Looks like we have a little live screen, live little marker up in the top left corner of the screen, if you can see that, Father.
Yep. I believe the Facebook.
Ooh. Well, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, Father Aaron Westman. This is Brother David Henley from the Glen Mary's Vocation Office. Here starting a new little project we're trying out on Facebook Live, interviewing different Glen Mary missioners that are passing through our headquarters. So we thought we'd kick it off today with a special guest, Father Aaron Westman. Father Aaron was ordained a Glen Mary priest in 2012.
Yeah. Already 5 years.
5 years as a Glen Mary priest,
Yeah.
and just recently returned. He's a little jet lagged. He flew in from
Brussels last evening and got in, I suppose, around 9 o'clock in Cincinnati. So it was Brussels to Warsaw to Chicago to Cincinnati. So it's quite the flight. 24 plus hours of flying.
Excellent. That is a good journey. We're glad you're here, though. We're glad you're here with us. You're awake. You got some coffee.
Yeah.
It's
extra strong.
It's probably about midnight over in Brussels right now. So you're.
Yeah, getting close. Getting close. Yeah.
But one of the reasons I wanted to invite Aaron in today was because he's recently, just in the last week, officially, or maybe it's been longer than a week, but officially assigned and named pastor in a couple of our Glen Mary missions.
Yeah.
And so I thought it would be great for you to share a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I look forward to it.
You're headed out to Bertie County and
In Washington County.
which are in the state of North Carolina. Up here on this end of our missionary map. Oh, I guess you can't really see that dots, that laser pointer up here, but we're up here in this part of North Carolina out on the coast. So what do you think you'll be doing out in these mission areas as a Glen Mary priest?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I one of the things that I'm looking forward to doing is simply going into the area and trying my best to learn to see what's going on. I know Father Mike has been serving there, I think, for close to 8 years, maybe even longer than that. And so I think just to continue to do the great work that he's been doing. But also, I think it's a beautiful area. I look forward to being that close to the ocean, which is always nice. I served a Holy Week down there back when I was seminarian, probably in 2010.
Okay.
And so I got to know some of the people then, and they were really, really wonderful. And I had an excellent experience of being down there. And one of the things is there's quite a significant number of Filipinos that are in Windsor. And so the food was fantastic. So I certainly look forward to that.
So that's why you signed up for this assignment?
That's why I signed up. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, I mean, so you were there in Holy Week. That was going to be one of my questions, is have you ever been out there before?
Yeah.
What else besides the food and the people do you recall about the mission? Do they have a church there? What does the church look like?
This is an interesting thing about the community in Windsor. They really don't have a church yet. And I think that this mission has been open something like 10 or 15 years. And in that time, they've been having Mass in the rectory, where they have a little bit of a chapel, at least as my experience remembers it. And then they also rent the space from a Methodist community for their weekend liturgies. And so that's the part of the experience of being in Windsor. Now over in Plymouth, from what I remember, there's both a Hispanic and an English-speaking community. They do have their own church. But I'll be serving more or less as kind of sacramental minister there, because Julian Crespo and his family are there, and he's kind of takes care of the day in and day out experience. So I'm looking forward to the diversity. I mean, if you imagine in a small area like North Carolina, in these rural areas, there's Filipino community, local community, also a Hispanic community. So this is going to be a very excellent experience for me.
Right. How big of, well, first you mentioned Julian. He is there. He's doing great work. He's a Glen Mary lay missioner. We should give a little plug for the lay missioners.
Yeah, absolutely.
That he's been out there serving as minister for a number of years. How big are the two different communities where you'll be serving? These aren't large inner city or suburban parishes.
I think that Windsor's population is probably under 3,000 people. And I think that Plymouth is probably similar. I'd have to check the stats, but of course, they're small rural towns. And this is, of course, part of Glen Mary's ministry, to go to these places where there hasn't been any kind of official Catholic presence established. Go to places that are much more rural than normal, and also a little bit more poor. Right. And so I think that this is very much in keeping with Glen Mary's charism. Sure. Which is really exciting. I mean, there's a true missionary spirit about it. I've been over in Belgium for the last 3 years, 3+ years, and that's been excellent for me. But I was in very much a university town. We still had I was part of a parish called St. Quintin's there, so I give a shout out to all the wonderful people at St. Quintin's who I miss a lot, for sure. And that was very missionary because Catholicism is struggling in Western Europe, specifically in Belgium, but it's not the kind of same missionary work that we do in ours, because we're going to a place that's really never seen a Catholic presence before. And so in one sense, it's a lot like Paul's ministry, going to these places that have never had Christianity present, at least as a Catholic form. So.
Right. That's one thing I was thinking about as I was wondering about your new assignment out there. And you mentioned that they celebrate in kind of the house church there, and that they use the rented space over from the Methodist church. Yeah. Do you think you'll build a new church in the mission there? Do you think that's part of the?
Long-term plan, I guess I'd have to sit down with the folks and see where things are at in that regard. I'm always open to the chance to basically help the community in whatever is possible. If building a church is in their future, I would love to help with that. I know they do have a piece of property. So that they had purchased a piece of property, and so it just kind of depends on what the future looks like. But that's always excellent. In a lot of Glen Ray missions, we have been able to build churches and then in many ways establish the Catholic presence such to the extent we can hand it over to the diocese. So.
Right, that's the whole goal in the Glen Ray missions. Yeah. I mean, speaking of that, if you check out the other Glen Ray Facebook page, you'll see a little video from the actual groundbreaking of the new church there in Eastern Tennessee last week. There was a little bit of a ceremony there in the Knoxville diocese, which was you have a connection with as well.
Yeah, my first assignment as a priest, I served 2 years out in Maynardville and Rutledge, which was just excellent. I think at that point they were a couple years old as missions, and they're growing significantly. There's been tremendous work by the pastor, Father Steve, also Brother Joe, Brother Craig, and a number of seminarians that have come through the area. Which is really excellent because they've grown well. The people there have taken upon themselves this missionary spirit. Right. And I think that's what's one of the characteristics of our missions. We ourselves go as missioners, but we very much have that vision that everybody in our parishes are called to kind of imbibe that missionary spirit or embody that missionary spirit.
Sure. And I think it's good to mention Brother Joe and Brother Craig as part of the team there in Eastern Tennessee that you were working with. And luckily, blessedly enough, you'll be working with a couple of brothers, which I got to get a little plug in for them out in North Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely, Brother Verge and Brother Kurt. And I'm actually really excited because really in my history with Glen Ray, I haven't had a chance to work with them. Okay. But I know of them, and I know them from being in the community. So I look forward to being part of what they're doing down there, which is really excellent. So.
Yeah, it's going to be an awesome team, really, when you think about it, with those two and Julian helping out and serving in Plymouth. It's going to be just a fun time for all of you, and a really, absolutely. I think they will be most welcoming and help you to get acclimated to the new mission there. So
in one sense, it's a good symbol of what Glen Ray is trying to do in our different missions, which is to sort of have priestly presence and brother presence and sister presence, but also presence of the laity, and so all of us working together to sort of do the best we can to bring about the kingdom of God. So I look forward to working with them a lot. So.
Right, and I think they've very much been doing that, bringing about the kingdom of God and building up the kingdom of God. Literally and figuratively. With Virgin, the ministry he does of actually doing some building and repairs out there, especially during the tornadoes that hit them and flooding that they've had in that area over the years, and Kurt as well with his connections and relationships with people, especially ecumenically reaching out to people at so many different churches out there. So. One thing I was thinking about asking, I was going to say, but recently you finished up your doctorate degree, but you're not quite finished. I can't call you doctor yet.
No, not quite yet. So, so I was in Belgium for the last 3+ years, and working first on what they call advanced masters there, and that's to get the sacred license of theology. And then I entered the doctoral program, which is typically 4 years. Okay. And I just completed the second year, and we'd be moving into my 3rd year of the doctoral program. Okay. So I have two official years left on the program. Oh, wow. But what's nice about the Leuven program, not only is it rigorous and it's very challenging and invites one to really think critically about theology, but it also gives a person a chance to really focus on their research. And really there's not a lot of extra work during the doctoral years, besides trying to publish in journals, attending and presenting at conferences, international conferences all around the world, but then also trying to write the actual text of the dissertation.
Wow.
And the dissertation, at least mine, will be roughly 4 chapters, and I'm moving through the 3rd chapter right now.
Already.
And so, yeah, I know that the missions are calling my name, so I have to try my best to keep writing. But I think when I'm down in North Carolina, I'll somehow be able to try to balance, keep continuing to write and research, but also being very much involved in the mission there. So, but yeah, the doctoral work was excellent. I just, that goal is, of course, to finish the dissertation and then successfully defend it.
Wow.
Which hopefully happens.
So will you have to go back to Belgium to defend it at that point?
Yeah, so I think, likely it'll be probably going back once or twice a year to meet with my promoter and co-promoter, and also just to keep somewhat in touch with the academic life and situation there. But I'll have to go back to Belgium at the end of the day to finally defend it. So hopefully in a couple of years, but we'll see how the work comes along.
Times a year to Europe there. This is a great plug for vocation prospects. Join Glen Mary. You get to see the world from Bertie County, North Carolina, all the way to Western Europe as well. The great joys of live broadcasting. We lost our map.
Technical defects.
That's all right. We'll just set it up here. We had our map up there, but we've got the...
At least you're wearing your hard hat.
I was going to give that to you at the end there as a little going away present.
Oh, really? This is great. Did I put this on?
Building up the kingdom of God.
Yeah, this will keep me safe. And that's wonderful.
So, but even without the map, we can continue on here. I did have a couple other more vocation-oriented questions.
Oh, okay, absolutely.
Especially with thinking of guys who are watching, who are discerning a vocation as a Glen Mary priest or a Glen Mary brother. Just kind of overall in your ministry experience, what would have been maybe some of your or one of your greatest joys serving as a Glen Mary priest?
Oh man, that's an excellent question. I think first of all, one of my greatest joys is in and getting to know members of the community. I found that as I went through formation, you're asking a lot of questions about what is God calling me to? How can I know what my vocation might be? You're trying to discern particular charisms, which are vast within the church. And I think one of the things for me is that I continued to meet more and more Glen Marians, and I said to myself, if I kind of grew up, if you will, and turned out to be like this or that missionary, that would be a life well lived. And I was really impressed with the character of the people in the community. So that for sure is one of the main joys. The second is, for me, there's a certain adventure about doing Glen Mary's missionary work. You go to these places that haven't necessarily had the presence of Catholicism that other more, say, urban areas might have, or historically certain areas of the United States. And so you're doing work which I see it being as very much related to the first work of the church, of the apostles, of the missionaries. And so I'm inspired by that. I like the challenge of it. I mean, I think that our magazine is called the Glen Mary Challenge. Yeah, exactly. It's very much appropriate. And you're trying to make the best of the situation with what you've been given. A lot of times it's that you are able to meet and to be with the people, and you find that they change your life and make you a better priest and a better missioner. But also you get to see that the area where you're serving is far more than just the local group of Catholics, but you begin to see the way in which God works in mysterious and profound ways amidst the community, and you can hopefully, if people are generous and open, they let you become part of what's already going on there. So it's this sense of mission that I find it to be adventurous. I find it to be so much in line with the history of the church and the gospel. So that continued to draw me to Glen Mary, and still does today, which is why, I mean, as much as I enjoyed being in Leuven, as much as the people were wonderful, and it was a great experience, and I'll always be thankful for it, my heart was still being pulled in many ways to come back to be in the missions. And people there said that they could tell that they knew that. And when I announced that I would be leaving, they said, we understand that you have been given a charism, both from your community, but also it's a gift from God, and to live that out, right? And so that's why I'm really excited. And as I reflect in my dissertation in the final chapters, kind of more of the practicalities of the theory, what I'm working on now, I'll be able to sort of be in the mission, thinking through some of the practicalities of what I'm writing on and how they might actually sort of play out in our missionary experience.
So that practicality will actually be worked into the dissertation itself.
Yeah, it's the 4th chapter, so I'm still working on trying to get there.
Right.
And so actually, I think it works perfect. That the timing seems to be just right.
Sure.
To be in a mission, to think about some of these practical aspects, and then to even talk with the people who are there and say, does this seem to speak to your life at all, or is this too much, say, involved in the academy, or too much perhaps in theory? It might look good, but it doesn't necessarily seem to play out.
Right.
So that's actually I really look
I
forward
hadn't
to
even
that.
thought of that aspect of it, but
Yeah.
really you're going to be getting the degree from Lumen, but it's also in one aspect going to be coming from the people in the mission.
Absolutely, and that's the interesting thing. So part of what my studies have done have confirmed the formation and training that I've been given by Glenn Mary, and the kind of missiological training that we get coming through formation. And
that's a
so
little plug for St. Meinrad, where we have our guys studying.
oh yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. So between St. Meinrad's formation for priests, but also our own formation, whether it's through the novitiate, or in my day we had some of these pre novitiate years, and so we had an opportunity to get some of the theory from experienced missioners, but also to get the hands-on experience as well.
Okay.
So yeah, a lot of what I've studied has been able to sort of confirm and affirm what I've learned, but also it's given me a chance to ask particular, more difficult questions, perhaps specifically looking at the culture of the United States, and what does it mean for us to be Christian today in 2017? What are the challenges that people go through? How can we still live faith in a vibrant way in the United States? And one of the things you see specifically, which is a little bit ominous, but I think we always have to be hopeful as Christians and as Catholics that we're saying that in some ways in the U.S. we're kind of moving towards this sort of post-Christian society. So some of the vestiges of Christianity are still there, and Christianity has impacted culture in the U.S., but not in every case now is it easy just to simply be a Christian living in culture. And in one sense, I think for us as Glenmarians, we are, I think, well set up to sort of deal with some of these struggles, because we've always gone into areas that I think where it's not always easy to be Catholic for sure, and even where Christian populations struggle, because there are a high percentage of unchurched people in general in our areas. And so I think, doing the small things, which we do really, really well, building relationships, taking the initiative to evangelize. I mean, I think that this, you can't underestimate how important that is, even if it's going door to door, if it's trying to be present in the communities. All of that is really important for evangelization, and I think we see that you always have to see yourself as in a missionary situation, no matter where you're assigned. And so whether or not, we're in a post-Christian society or not, in one sense you can have to say, well, it doesn't necessarily matter, because we always have a particular calling, which is to love God, to love our neighbor, and to really be missionary as best we can.
Right. And so that's speaking of evangelization that you bring up, that sense of adventure, the joys of being in community, it kind of is good things for a young man who's discerning their vocation, to see if those qualities, that type of charism speaks to them as well. But one thing I always like to talk with guys about as well is that there are challenges as well.
Yeah,
I don't know if you could
absolutely.
speak to that as well, just any challenges that you faced out in the missions.
Yeah, so there are so many in many ways, and this was also the case as I was coming through formation. I remembered, of course, I felt like I was at home in the community and with the members, but I also felt that even in the midst of the challenges, I thought that this is still the place where I am to be, because the challenges and the sacrifices are basically part of life in general, especially the Christian way of life. But I think one of the challenges would be very simply, we just don't have a lot of resources.
Yeah.
We have a limited number of people, so we have to try to make do with what we have. And I think that there is a joy that comes from that, though, which I think is really excellent. I mean, I think of one story when I was celebrating Mass in our storefront in Rutledge, Tennessee, storefront church, and I think we were either having Mass or we were in the middle of adoration, and somebody walked in the front door, and he started yelling because somebody had parked in the parking spot for his business, which was a barber shop. So I think I was maybe elevating the Eucharist at the time, and this guy comes walking in, he's like, "Who's parked in my parking spot?" So you learn how to adjust.
Yeah, you have to learn to flow with it.
And there's something great about that. And the people do too, which is really excellent. And so there's a certain kind of humor that's required to do our missionary work. The other challenge is I don't want to overemphasize that there are both spiritual and also material poverties in our areas, but that is the case. I mean, I think about the problems people struggle with drugs, particularly in Appalachia, but also in many of our missions in the rural areas. And that's sad because you really are left with the inability to, what do you do for folks? You see families deteriorating. You see kids passed on from parent to other parent to grandparents, and they don't have a sense of stability in their families.
Right.
Hopefully or maybe we can provide some kind of stability for them by being a kind of Catholic presence in these areas, but it's difficult. The other thing is, people living in let's just say perhaps not as well put together houses that they maybe would desire, where it gets quite cold in the winter times. And so sometimes there's not a lot we can do for people in this situation. Sometimes we can help them with resources economically. Some of our brothers do great jobs in helping repair and to build. Sometimes it's just not being afraid to be present with them. Not to see them not as outcasts, but to see them as human beings that have a certain dignity about them.
Right.
And then of course there's this whole thing of that there is also the spiritual poverty. One of the things in the research I'm doing, you see as well that it's actually the rural areas of the United States and even Middle America, if you will, where people are going to church less and less. And also it's the case that in these areas that people are staying married less. So it's one of those struggles that exists. And so I don't know. There's no easy solution to any of these problems, but I do think the presence of the gospel message, the presence of the Eucharist, can change people's lives, and that's important to me, especially as a priest. The sacramental nature of the church and my own identity as a priest. So.
Sure. Well, I think that's a wonderful way to look at it. I mean, those challenges exist in all of our missions, the material poverty as well as the spiritual poverty. The challenge is going to continue to be there. The need for more young men, young women to respond to their call to become a Glen Mary mission is out there.
Yeah.
And we do that by not running away from it, but as you said, being present with the people. Yeah. So I think that's a wonderful vision of how we as Glen Mary missioners are reaching out to the people.
Yeah,
we're being present. We're not running away and leaving them by themselves, but bringing our presence as well as bringing the presence of Christ in the sacraments. So I think that's fantastic. I'm looking forward to following up with you sometime.
Yeah.
Maybe after 6 months down the road in the mission, we can do another little session on Facebook Live, or maybe we can come out to the missions and visit you and get a little tour on the Facebook Live.
Yeah, no, that'd be excellent. You're always welcome.
So thank you very much. Any closing words of wisdom for a young man who's discerning his call to become a Glen Mary priest or a Glen Mary brother?
No, I'd say that you follow what it is you feel God's speaking in your heart. Speak to people who you know, who you can trust. Don't be afraid. And know that formation is a long process, so you don't have to make a decision on day one. But if it is that God's calling you to be a missionary priest, a missionary brother, missionary sister, and if He's calling you to Glen Mary, it's worth taking that risk. It's worth looking at it, and it'll change your life definitely for the better.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one thing that we always encourage guys, just come and see.
Yeah.
There's opportunities throughout the year for a vocation missionary experience.
You might be able to come to North Carolina.
Yeah, we'll look into scheduling a trip and bring some guys out to visit with you out there. That'd be great.
Great.
I guess one final question I was thinking of, if it was kind of hard to read the screen. I don't know if there were any questions that came up while we were broadcasting there, but if there's any kind of follow-up questions, can I send those out to you?
Sure, no problem. Yeah, absolutely.
So any kind of questions can be sent to the messenger on the Facebook here. We can send those out to Aaron for follow-up. And also, while you're on there, if you want to send questions in general about Glen Mary vocations, you can do that on the messenger part of Facebook here. We'll be able to respond to you as soon as we can. And we'd like to do this in the future with other Glen Mary priests and brothers, so drop us a little request in that Facebook Messenger as which Glenmary priest, which Glenmary brother, maybe a Glenmary sister that you'd like to see interviewed here on this Glenmary Missionary Moments. And finally, but should have been foremost, visit glenmary.org. That's our Glenmary website, and you can certainly find out more information about Glenmary and the ministry that we're doing throughout rural America. So thanks for watching, and we look forward to doing this again sometime soon.
All right, thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you, Aaron. It's great to see you.
God bless.
Have a good afternoon, everybody.